Okay, this is oil painting for beginners. So what I have here on the table is everything you're going to need to start with. I'm going to walk you through painting a still life of some oranges. To get to this stage, you need to decide what it is you want to be painting, and then either paint it from life or set it up and take a decent photograph of it, print it, and then you can refer back to your photograph whenever you need to. I prefer this method because then your still life doesn't go fraught, or you don't have to paint it all in one go. You can come and go away from your painting as you need to, which suits me. And of course you also need 1 or 2 days in between layers for it to dry. We'll get to the layers. So I'm going to paint on canvas paper, which is like this. You can also paint on canvas board or a primed canvas like this. Very readily available in most arts and craft shops. But I started a series on this paper, so I'm going to continue with this because it's going to be the same image. Now, once you have just chosen your picture you're going to be painting, you're going to set up your canvas so that it's the same size square rectangle as your picture. Otherwise you're going to have to end up cropping and fitting it onto it. There are different stages of painting something like this. So it's pretty basic. I'm going to do a video on each stage and walk you through it. So your first stage is the underpainting, and it will look like that. Then you let it dry and you come back to it in a day, 2, 3 days time, and you do stage 2, which is your background, which is going to look like that. Okay. Then you let it dry again and you start doing the base colors on the orange and the nachi, and it will look like that. And then your last layers, I haven't done it in that series, but I've done it in a previous one. You do the finer details, the white and the layering goes on top of the orange. And you need to do the white and the layering on top of the orange, which has dried a little bit. That is my preference. Some people paint differently. They like to paint it all in one sitting, all very wet and all very thick. If that suits you, then that is a different approach. You can go ahead and do that. But these videos and this demonstration, I'm going to let it dry between each successive layer because it's easier to work with that way. So once you've figured out your image, you need to sort out your equipment. I paint with Winsor & Newton, Winton Student Range oil colors. It's what I was trained with, is what I prefer. I don't mix my oil color brands because then your color theory doesn't work. So whatever brand of oil paint you're going to use, stay with the same brand. Don't now use a color from Winsor and a color from Dala and a color from somewhere else. When you start mixing, and if you get quite used to your color theory, it's not going to work out. So stay with the brand and you'll be happy. I am going to use up all the bits and pieces from my old tubes, which is why these look at the end. I've laid it out from white, yellow, orange, reds, greens, blues, browns, and then you end with the black. And I'll show you in a minute. When you squeeze it, start with those colors will be fine, and then as you learn to paint more, you will pick up 1 or 2 other colors as you go along. I've picked up a few different greens. I have added a chrome green hue, and I've added a terra verde. As you paint, you will discover you need more paints. So for this picture, for the brushes for this picture, I'm going to have some bristle brushes. They're quite rough and they're quite long. A thin one, this is a size 2, a 4 and a 6. A 2 round, a 4 flat and a 6 flat. I prefer, you'll find what you prefer, rounds or flats. Flats are nice for your background, you'll see. And then the details I prefer to switch to my soft brushes. So most people would use these for acrylics. I jump over and use them with oils as well. It doesn't really matter nowadays. And then a very fine one to be doing all those delicate whites on the top. We're going to be needing your thin brushes. You need to choose a palette knife that you like. These are two of my favorites that I've had for a very long time. They have different numbers and they have different sizes. So whatever your preference, 1 or 2 is usually good. This is a nice one because it springs back, and you can mix your oil paints on your glass, which I will also demonstrate. Then you need turpentine with your oil paint. I've poured it in here already. Your normal turpentine from the hardware store, the cheap stuff, is absolutely fine. When you get more fancy later on, you might prefer genuine turps. It's expensive and it smells like pine trees, but your genuine turps to paint with, to mix with your colors, has a different feel for it. I usually have 2 tins, a tin for cleaning my brush and then a clean solution for mixing with my colors, so that I don't mix my colors with dirty turps, because then it's going to change what my color looks like. So I am now going to set up my paints. I'm going to squirt these colors on this glass top, which has got white underneath, in my rainbow color like that, and then we can start with our color mixing. You always use more white than you ever imagine, but you can always come back and give yourself some more. So I set my color palette up in a semicircle. And then with your palette knife I take the color I need and then I mix it here. Now, we know what we're painting, so we just need to give ourselves the colors we need. There's not really any point giving ourselves the colors we know we're not going to need. Like, I'm not going to give myself green because I'm not sure I'll need green. I am going to get blue because we need to mix up this grey background. I can't get it open. And we are going to need to mix complementary colours together to get a nice chromatic grey. So we are definitely going to need blue. French ultramarine is the go-to blue. Prussian blue, we're going to have a little bit. It's very intense, this colour. It's a different one. And you're only going to need a little bit of it if you ever do need it. Turquoise, cerulean blue hue. I can't get my tube open. I don't think we're going to need it. I'll try again just now. Then we are going to need some browns, because they go into the shadows and they get mixed in with the greys. So I tend to keep my browns on a separate side altogether. I don't usually put them in with the yellows and oranges. It's not a big painting, so I'm not going to need my whole palette. I'm just going to mix in this one area. tubes are quite old. The paint's getting a bit thick. That's your burnt umber, and now your raw umber. You will also find as you paint that you will have a go-to brown for shadows. Yeah, it's all a personal feel of how you get there. Okay, so there are our paints. Okay, I'm ready to start. I have my color palette over there. I've got my picture and my canvas. I'm going to paint this phase flat down, and then I'll put it up on the easel. I've laid it like this so the camera can see both aspects together. I'm going to use my bristle brushes for the base colors. Now essentially what we need to do is get rid of the white. Getting rid of your white background allows your final painting to have a richer, deeper depth of field, is the academic theory. And now our picture is predominantly orange, so your base colors are going to be the complementary color of orange, which is blue. So I am going to mix up just blue with your painting tubes, and I'm going to draw this onto my picture and then wash out everything else so that the white goes away. And I'm going to use the pure straight French ultramarine. If it's a bit thick and sticky, you see how I lift up the tubes from my tin, and you mix it on the glass so that it is quite thin. You don't need much. You don't want it thick. You really just want it thin. You want the canvas paper or the canvas board or the canvas, whatever you're painting on, to absorb the turpentine and the oil paint. It gives it a nice undercoating for future layers of tubes. Not everybody paints this way. Some people go straight onto the white. It's their choice. It is always also good to have a phone book nearby, because they have a new purpose in life to wipe your brushes on. Okay, now I am ready to start. I'm proficient enough to not need to use a pencil. It is a good idea if you could get to the stage of drawing in with some paint. Pencil, it's a different medium, and you don't want to mix it with your oil paint. So I'm holding my picture. I want it pretty much in the middle, more or less. You don't want too many details because you're going to be painting over it. So let's get my general shape in and see if it's going to work. You can always terps it out, rub it off, start again. But you also have artistic license. You're not a photo printer. You have a flair and a style of your own. So use it. You like your wonky orange, then go with your wonky orange. This mapping out is your positive, negative space drawing exercises, this is where I use it the most, to check your background spaces, your shadow spaces, are they lining up with my object, my inside spaces. Okay, that's all detail. Change that curve a little bit, that's detail. And this could have been a bit bigger. There we go. Okay, I've got my shape in. Changing my brush to the bigger one. I'm using lots of terps. And I'm going to paint out my background. You can see now the benefits of being flat for this stage, because I think it might run if it was up. I have to move my clip, it's in the way. Okay. Now, if you can see where the shadows are under the orange, it would be a good idea to make those a little darker. It helps if you get it as accurate as possible, because then your next layer becomes easier. Then you know where to do your colors next time. Except this is quite wet, it's not sticking. Right, now background's in. I'm switching brushes again. Rinse that one off, dry it on the newspaper. Pick up my thin one. I need to do some of this. So we want the general idea of the segments of what's going on, but we also want to make sure that all that white canvas is covered. So sometimes on the white areas I'm just using what isn't clean terps anymore, but it's clearer than the blue. Just cover up all those white areas that haven't had paint or terps on, so that your base is all soaked up. And when you've done that, that is all you need to do for today, because that is your base underpainting, and there is no ways you can paint on top of this because it is way too wet. So you are going to have to let it dry. Leave your palette as it is. Oil paint stays wet for a few days. The next phase, we are going to incorporate our blue and orange and white into a nice chromatic grey for the background. And that's phase 2. So I can go finish my cup of tea now. Until next time.